This is Abbotsford, British Columbia right now, as of 2022. But in November of last year, this is what Abbotsford looked like. After several days of heavy rain, much of the low-lying valley around this city was flooded, wreaking havoc and causing millions of dollars in damage. But this video isn't just about Abbotsford. This video is about a larger pattern, because what happened here is likely going to happen a lot more often. With climate change, rivers across Canada are expected to flood more often. There are many complex factors behind this, but here's a quick overview. In the case of coastal rivers, you have sea level rise from the ocean. For rivers that flow from mountains, you have snow that is melting faster and faster every year. Then you have frequent wildfires that destroy forests, leaving behind land that is much less absorbent to water. Add increasingly intense rainstorms into the mix, and you have a perfect recipe for flooding. That's what happened in Abbotsford and other parts of British Columbia last year. A month's worth of rain fell in 2 days over areas upstream that had been ravaged by wildfires in the previous summer, leading to devastating results. Floods like this are a growing concern for the many cities across Canada that are located near rivers, places like Calgary, Ottawa, Montreal, and many, many others. So what should we do about this? Well, there's the obvious answer. Just build a wall. That always works, right? But the problem is, we've already tried that. Throughout history, humans have created walls along rivers and other water bodies to make sure that water stays out and land stays dry. One of the most common structures for this is the dike, a simple wall made by piling up dirt and rocks next to the water. You see, floods are nothing new because rivers are not naturally static bodies of water. Over the years, a river can fluctuate in speed and size and even shift direction depending on the climate. Every once in a while, those fluctuations flood the land next to the river. That might be great for a wetland or swamp, but not so great for farmland and buildings. So, over the years, humans have often built dikes and other structures to make sure the river stays its lane. And that has allowed us to build settlements right up to the water's edge. But climate change and the larger floods it brings is proving to be a real threat to these kinds of protections. You can really see that in the Fraser Valley of British Columbia. Experts predict that by the end of the 21st century, floods that we're used to seeing every 200 to 500 years will start occurring more like every 50 years. And the dikes here just wouldn't be able to handle that. A survey of dikes in the Fraser Valley found that 71% of them could fail during this kind of a flood. Fixing those dikes and building them higher comes with a huge price tag. The provincial government here estimates that it will cost $10 billion to upgrade the dikes in the Fraser Valley. $10 billion! Just let that sink in for a bit. Okay, definitely not the right choice of words. Now, I do want to mention that building dikes isn't the only solution here. In Calgary, the city is looking to build a $432 million reservoir to temporarily hold water when its river runs too high. In Ontario, the Clairville Dam holds back water to help prevent flooding in the GTA. And I think a particularly interesting example is in Winnipeg. In the 60s, the city dug out what is effectively a giant ditch called the floodway to keep the city from flooding. During heavy rains, it reroutes water from the Red River around the entire city. And this is a massive piece of infrastructure. At the time, it was the second largest earth-moving project in the world, after the Panama Canal. But at the end of the day, all these solutions share one thing in common: the extraordinary cost. And because of that, increased river floods pose a much more existential question to a lot of areas. You simply can't build a multi-billion-dollar floodway for every community impacted by climate change. And I find this to be a common narrative these days. The increase in river floods is just one of many, many stories where the impacts of a changing climate will leave us paying for insanely expensive fixes or grappling with loss. And honestly, it can often feel overwhelming or straight up depressing. But for this story, I found something that helped me look at this issue a bit differently. In the Fraser Valley, many are seeing the upcoming challenges to the dike network as an opportunity to help salmon. Yes, salmon. The Fraser River is the world's largest salmon-producing river. Each year, hundreds of thousands to millions of these fish swim up the Fraser to spawn, and their offspring then make their way down this river towards the Pacific. Along the way, they look for refuge in little streams, marshes, or sloughs to rest and grow stronger before they swim out into the ocean. But it turns out that these dikes have blocked salmon from accessing these crucial resting areas. According to the Watershed Watch Salmon Society, over 1,500 kilometers of this habitat have been blocked by dikes. Well, since so many of these dikes need to be updated anyways, many are advocating that salmon-friendly infrastructure be integrated into the upgrades. This could include gates that open up to let fish access the streams behind the dikes. It could also include fish-friendly pump stations that don't harm fish when pumping water from the stream to the river. And the salmon need all the help they can get. Salmon returns have been declining for decades. In fact, last year, the federal government closed 60% of commercial salmon fisheries because they were on the verge of collapse. This initiative really helped me see some silver linings in this issue, but it also highlighted something important. These dikes might have not been that great of an idea to begin with. Many are now recognizing that in the long term, a more sensible response to increased flooding might be to just give space for these floods to happen naturally, while moving people safely out of the way. In 2006, the Netherlands launched Room for the River, a program that involved buying out homeowners who lived close to rivers and moving their dikes further back, creating more space for river floods. A little closer to home, the state of Washington has a similar program called Floodplains by Design, which has reconnected over 7,000 acres of floodplain back to the river. These changes, of course, require very difficult conversations because it can involve some people giving up their homes. But again, it's not a complete loss. With each floodplain that's restored comes new marshes, wetlands, and creeks. Those areas offer new habitats for fish and wildlife while creating critical protections for the communities behind them. That helps me see this issue a bit differently. Climate change and increased river floods do threaten to change many of the landscapes that we've grown used to, and our knee-jerk reaction is often to preserve these places against that change, to keep things exactly the same. But in some cases, I think we could start seeing this as a bit more of an opportunity, one that invites us to re-examine our relationship to rivers in general. Or at the very least, help out some salmon. They could really use it.